Okay, so what is a closing culture? A closing culture is about a culture that fosters and pushes forward the sales process above everything else. One thing a lot of startups will admit, or any company will admit, is that revenue can cure a multitude of sins, or revenue can cure a multitude of mistakes. And that's really, really true, especially with startups. You can try to figure it out as you go along, but closing and making new sales is the most important thing when you're starting your new business. With that said, it's so easy for companies that are established or even companies that are in the startup phase to really look at their process and say, you know what, before we bring customers on, we're gonna analyze everything to death. We're gonna focus on this piece, we're gonna focus on operations, we're gonna focus on this, blah, 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 blah. And instead, they don't wind up selling at all. In fact, to a point that they'll even favor their existing clientele way more than they do their leads that are coming in or their potential new business. A closing culture focuses on you need to make sure that you are there for your leads, that you have the staff, that you have the capability. It doesn't matter how big your staff is or even how small your staff is. You need to make sure that you are present, and when they have questions, you're answering those questions. A good example of this would be when someone walks into a retail store and they are looking around confused and they have no idea what they want and there's not a person in sight to help them. You may have experienced this at your local Walmart or something where you're looking for something, you can't find someone, and you wind up wandering aisles just hopelessly trying to find someone to help you answer a simple question of, do you guys have fabric needles or fabric pins, or I don't know, whatever you want to buy at Walmart. The issues though is that the Walmart as a whole is not necessarily, in that case, is not focusing on their clientele. Instead, they're focusing on the operations. They're focusing on making sure that the shelves are stocked or whatever else. And if there were another competitor to emerge who is more helpful, everything said and done, if everything was considered equal amongst those two, I'm sure the other competitor would probably win, which is why when you look at new Home Depots opening in new locations, they focus on overstaffing that Home Depot for the first few months of launch because they want every single person to walk that door to be extremely grateful for the help that they receive, to a point that they put their loyalty in Home Depot, and then 6 months later you'll see that whole staff move, and even their employment will drop a little bit for that specific store, just because they've kind of been able to harness more attention to that one store. Now, I know I'm using retail examples because they're just easy to come to mind, but this is the case with every single company, whether you're a SaaS company and you have leads coming in, but you're trying to build a better product. A lot of times it can be easy to say, you know what, I'm gonna wait on those leads, or I'm gonna get to them when I get to them because I'm working on coding this last module, or I'm working on focusing on this, instead of picking up the phone right away and getting on the phone with them and figuring out how you can help them. So a closing culture puts leads and potential customers above business operations at all times. This can kind of show itself in the day-to-day with meetings. Meetings, I think, are the perfect example of this. Most meetings, if we look at them, really how much are we actually accomplishing during that meeting? If we were at the end of the time, we were say, okay, how much did we just accomplish in this meeting? Most of the time we would say, everyone kind of knows what they're supposed to be doing now, but they kind of already did going into the meeting. So it's really just everyone kind of knows where everyone is, but everyone could have done that with an email or something like that. That's probably what most meetings could be summarized by. However, a lot of times sales people in particular, will find themselves in meetings, internal meetings, while leads are coming in, and they won't respond to those leads until it's convenient for them. They'll either schedule blocks like their lead follow-up period, where even though leads have been coming in and asking questions, they'll say, well, I'm gonna respond to leads between 3 and 5 p.m. Well, that's what's convenient for you. It may not at all be what's convenient for the lead. In fact, if you really think about it, the most convenient time to follow up with a lead is the second they submitted that question. Why? They submitted that question at a time that was convenient for them to do their research and to even be on your website and submit a question. So if you can follow up with them then versus waiting on your convenient period, you're most likely going to increase your conversion rates significantly. There's a lot of studies that'll back up kind of the actual how likely you are to get a hold of a lead, if you can get a lead on the sooner you respond. And that's really what it comes down to. It's as simple as human behavior. Someone's available at that certain time, they're not necessarily going to be available an hour later or even 2 hours later because life goes on. They've got a bunch of busy things that they're doing. So to bring it back to meetings or bring it back to other things, a closing culture is the definition, or even diving into that culture, is a culture that says if a lead comes in, you can excuse yourself from what you're doing. If you're in the sales role, if your job is to increase business for the company, and that could either be the CEO, the owner who's wearing many different hats, or that could be someone who's wearing only a few hats but is focused mainly in the sales role, then your job is to follow up with that lead above everything else, including being able to say, you know what guys, I just had a lead come in. I know we're having this internal meeting, but just send me the notes and the recap. I need to follow up with this lead right now. Even a couple minutes ago, Kyle on our team, we had a new lead come in, and we have a 5-minute follow-up response time rule that we live by for our sales. And that's one of the metrics we measure our sales team by. And Kyle was in the middle of sending out some other work for another client of ours. And so he called another team member and said, hey, I have a new lead that just came in. I have a couple minutes to respond to them, 5 in particular. I need to finish this up. It'll take me 2 minutes to finish this up, but if you can look it over, it'll take me 1 minute to finish this up, and then I can go follow up with that lead within that 5-minute window. And right now, he's on the phone with that lead because that other person came in, stopped what they were doing, and prioritized this lead even over what they were doing by helping Kyle finish what he's doing. Okay, so a summary of what a closing culture is a culture that focuses on new opportunities, new leads, new business above existing. Now, does that mean you treat your clients like crap? Of course not. Does that mean you blow off clients all the time? No, of course not. But for those who are in the sales role or the sales capacity, you need to be able to work with your team to free you up so you can respond the way you would want to be responded to when you reach out to a company wanting to know different answers to questions you have or to know potential solutions to the problems you might have. If you enjoyed this video about what a closing culture is, I wrote a whole book on it, and you can read as much as you want. We talk about the 5-minute follow-up and what you actually need to do to get to that place with your organization, because it does take a lot. It is an adjustment. We talk about getting into culture and getting buy-in. We talk about sales and marketing alignment and how you need to have those two really closely aligned to have a true closing culture. So feel free to go onto Amazon, type in A Closing Culture by Josh Harcus or just A Closing Culture, and it should be one of the top entries that pop up.